Prom by Saundra Mitchell. This is a YA novel based on a Broadway play about a teenage girl, a lesbian in Indiana, who wants to go to prom with her girlfriend, but her girlfriend's homophobic mom is the head of the PTA and basically cancels prom for everyone. This story gets a bunch of news attention, then a bunch of washed up has-been Broadway stars hear about it and decide that they're going to come to Indiana and help this girl and fight for an inclusive prom because they think it will help their image. It will be good PR for them. And then spoilers, over the course of the story, the Broadway actors learn that actually it is nice to help people sometimes and I shouldn't just be a narcissist, focus solely on my career. And then the girlfriend ends up coming out of the closet and her homophobic mom learns to be more accepting, as do her homophobic friends. Sorry if that ruins the plot of this book/musical from 2018. But it's a very simple YA story that you know exactly where this is going to go. Also because of the Broadway nature, it's a sort of very simple surface level kind of story. But if you're anything like me, don't worry, you will completely forget that plot. There's also a movie version of this that came out after this book. I watched it right before reading this to, get a sense of the story. And then halfway through the movie, I was like, a lot of this seems vaguely familiar. And it turns out I had already seen the movie, apparently when it came out. Just didn't remember it. It's a pretty mid movie. I remember at the time it got a lot of negative reviews just because James Corden is in it. And I don't really know why people were hating on James Corden, but I remember everyone was hating on James Corden. He plays a gay, washed-up Broadway star. I don't know. The movie's fine. I mean, I watched it twice. I didn't hate it. It's very surface level. But the book, in my opinion, is the best version of this story by far. So I have not seen the Broadway play. There might be a recording of that, but I definitely didn't see it on Broadway. And I don't know that I want to watch a fourth version of this story being told. So I have not seen the Broadway play. I've seen the movie twice for some reason. And I just read this. This book focuses entirely on the two teenage girls in a secret relationship with each other. And that is the most interesting part of the story to me personally. The movie focuses a lot more on the Broadway stars. And this book has two point of views, and it's Emma and the other girl whose name I cannot remember. You have Emma Nolan and Alyssa Green. And the Broadway stars do not get a point of view in this. So if your favorite characters are the Broadway stars, you won't like this book as much as the movie, or I'm presuming the musical. I'm presuming the movie is a better adaptation of the musical. Just based on format, I think you would see a lot more of the Broadway stars. In this book, you could criticize it for its lack of Broadway starness, because they don't have a perspective. You don't see too much of them. I mean, they help Emma get ready for prom and learn to be confident in herself and yada yada. They become her fairy godparents in a way. You don't see too much of them really, and you definitely don't get their internality. So in this book, Emma just seems really sort of unconcerned that all of these famous people just showed up at her school at a protest and then adopted her, and she's just hanging out with Broadway stars. You could knock the book for that. However, this book takes this very simple story and elevates it in the medium of the book format. Because you get the point of view of these two characters, you understand so much more about them. Broadway theater really is sort of shallow and surface level. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean in the storytelling device of the medium. You can't go into people's thoughts really. I mean, I'm sure there's some plays that are really deep, but you're relying a lot on the actors to convey a lot of emotion in their voice and in their body language. And in a book, you just literally get their thoughts. And because this book is only focused on these two characters and it leaves out half the cast, you learn a lot more about Emma's school life and Alyssa's home life in a way that really makes these two characters feel much more real than they do in the movie, at least. We see a lot more instances of Emma being bullied, more instances of Alyssa's mom putting all this pressure on her to be the perfect daughter and, straight. So we feel a lot more sympathy for these characters, especially Emma. Because in the movie, at least, and I assume in the Broadway play, she's very happy-go-lucky. She's very much an optimist, which she is in this book as well. But because we see so much more of her, we see like the darker sides of the bullying that is happening in the school. And then we appreciate her optimism even more, that she's stared down adversity and continues on and continues to be herself and continues to fight for herself and for people like her. So I really like these characters a lot more in this book than I did in the movie. I didn't dislike them in the movie at all, but they're just much more fleshed out because you get literally their perspectives on everything. So I enjoyed that significantly more, personally. But again, if you want the story of the Broadway stars, this is not the book for you. You'd be disappointed in this book. So I really like this book, just like, especially in comparison to the movie. I gave this like 4 stars. It's like a 4.0, I guess. I still have criticisms of the story in and of itself. I mean, it's very sort of cliche, you know? It's got a real big 2010s retro homophobia. I don't know how else to describe it. It sort of feels like an outdated period piece in a lot of ways, although I'm sure there's probably still places where kids can't bring a same-sex prom date to prom. I don't know. There's still homophobic parents who don't want their kids to be gay, so it's not really that outdated. But I remember in the news cycle when there were talks of people who were excluded from prom, and this was a big thing. This really does feel like a product of a certain time. There was an author's note at the end of this with the creators or the writer of the play, I think, talking about how by the time this play was produced in like 2018, they worried that it was already outdated. I think even a couple years before that, when they were like thinking of producing it, you know, like working on it but not actively on Broadway yet, they were like, oh no, like things have improved so much since I don't know what year this takes place in. It takes place after Hamilton. There's like a Hamilton reference, so I guess it's like 2015, 2016, which I guess makes sense. But I feel like in the news cycle it was maybe like I wouldn't say like 2011, maybe that's too early, but whatever. But they worried that the story was already irrelevant by the time they were telling it. But then things continued to be shitty, actually, so it is still unfortunately relevant. But it is also still a sort of cliche story, you know, bullied gay teen overcomes adversity, you know, girl who's scared to come out to her homophobic parents ends up coming out, and then it changes their mind and everything's sort of hunky-dory by the end of it. It's definitely like an idealized story. I mean, it's possible. It's not completely ridiculous, but it's the cliche ideal version of the story where gay teen gets bullied, but everything turns out okay and everyone changes their mind. There's a really, I'll say, weak scene that doesn't feel super realistic where one of the Broadway guys is talking to a group of kids who are homophobic and have been bullying Emma, and basically he convinces them to stop being homophobic by quoting the Bible and Leviticus and all the places where it says you can't mix fabrics or get tattoos or not be a virgin, because all of these bullies, like one of them has a little tattoo, one of them's not a virgin, and one of them's wearing, you know, multiple fabrics, and they're all just immediately like, huh, maybe I am a hypocrite, maybe I should stop being homophobic, which unfortunately doesn't work. When homophobia is so culturally and religiously ingrained in you from the time of your birth, one little argument like that does not break down your entire worldview of the past 17 years. So that was a little too optimistic. So that scene's not fantastic, in my opinion. Everything just works out a little too well sometimes, which is, I mean, you'd expect, but it is like a sort of suspension of disbelief fantasy world. It's not fantasy, but you know what I mean. There's a lack of an element of realism that sort of is typical of the genre. I suppose I can't really knock that, but I'm going to anyway. Just personally, in my personal ratings, this isn't like the greatest story of all time. It doesn't go super deep into the topic. It's nothing that really hasn't been said before. The only unique twist here is the Broadway star element. there's a lot of other books about gay teenagers dealing with homophobia and, homophobic parents. So it just doesn't go that deep. The one other thing I wanted to talk about, so Emma is out, everyone knows she's gay, but Alyssa is in the closet, her girlfriend, and Emma really wants Alyssa to come out. She doesn't pressure her. That's important. She does not actually pressure her at all, but they have plans to come out at prom and go together and be openly together. And that's when Alyssa's gonna tell her mom. And the plan keeps getting pushed back because prom gets canceled and whatnot. And the mom keeps being homophobic, so Alyssa keeps like retreating and being scared to tell her mom. And Emma never pressures Alyssa and is like, you have to tell your mom. Like, you have to tell your mom or I'm gonna dump you. Or there's no ultimatum ever given. But she is really disappointed when Alyssa doesn't come out. Like, there's multiple opportunities where she could have, but she doesn't because she's scared. And Emma's very openly disappointed by that and will tell Alyssa that. However, when Emma came out, she got kicked out of her house. Like, her parents don't speak to her. She has to live with her grandma now. And I feel like a character in that situation who understands, like, how bad homophobia can be and, like, the severe consequences of coming out to a parent who is not accepting. I feel like she wouldn't pressure Alyssa so much to come out because she knows Alyssa's mom is homophobic, and so Alyssa could be thrown out of the house. I don't know where she'd live, if she'd have to move. That's not really talked about, which I feel like it should have been. I feel like Alyssa should have been like, well, what if my mom kicks me out like your dad kicked you out? And then what if I have to go live with my grandma completely somewhere else, and then I have to change schools, and then I won't see you, or, I feel like there's a lot of drama that could have been done there that isn't touched on at all. And I felt like Emma, as a character who had been through that, would be a bit more sympathetic to Alyssa and been like, yeah, her mom really could, like, kick her out, and she could really be screwed. I don't even know if she has a grandma who would take her in, Maybe she only has her mom, and then, like, what is she gonna do? End up in, like, the foster system or something? Like, just a homeless teenager? That's awful. I wouldn't want that. So that's not touched on at all. So this isn't a perfect book by any means. It's a very surface level story, but I liked the book anyway. It's a cute little story, especially for YA. I'm sure there's a lot of kids going through this or who went through this at the time, and maybe they're adults now and are looking back on this era. And then I'm sure there are people who liked the play but wanted more out of these characters who would like this book. I'm sure that there's an audience for this. I mean, I enjoyed it. It's a nice feel-good kind of story, except for all the homophobia. But the homophobia gets resolved, so it's a feel-good story, you could say. So a bit basic, a bit shallow, a bit surface level, a bit idealistic, but, like, a decent story, It encapsulated an era. This will one day be a historical text. I mean, I guess every book will one day be a historical text because it says something about the time it was written in. Never mind. That was a stupid point to make. I don't know. The book's okay. It's fine. If you're into really YA stories about triumphant gay love, then, this will tickle your fancy, so to say.